Line spacing is spacing in between lines, and paragraph spacing is spacing between hard returns, also known in Microsoft Word as paragraphs. First of all, line spacing, go ahead and click inside a paragraph that you want to change the spacing in between lines within that paragraph, or if it's got to be more than one paragraph, go ahead and select 2 or more. And then come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, and it's right there. Line and paragraph spacing. Click on it. In the top section, you have your line spacing. The bottom is paragraph. The default for the selection that I have here that's applied to it is single spacing. So if I go down to double, you can see in the document that it updates. It gives me a preview, so if I don't like it, then just move off of it. If you do, then go ahead and click on it, and there's double spacing. And then go ahead and click off. Now, when you're working on somebody else's document, you're not familiar with it, and you're like, oh, I got some spacing in between these 2 lines. Let me go ahead and click there, and I can't click there to type in some text. Why? Because, well, we know double spacing's been applied. In fact, if you come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group and turn on the Show Codes, you can see that there's no paragraph marker here that returns it with another paragraph there for a vacant line for us to type in something. And in fact, when you click and drag, you can see that not only does it select the text, but the extra spacing for double spacing from that line and the in-between to the next line. And then if you want more line options, well, let me go ahead and go back and click and drag and select the paragraphs again. Then come back up here, click on the drop-down arrow and go to line spacing options to find more options. It opens up the paragraph window so you can actually close out and click on the paragraph groups dialog box button. Again, same window. Just come down here to the spacing section, and we're focused on line spacing, not the paragraph spacing. So right now it's double spacing. Click on the drop-down arrow, go down to single, and you can see in the preview window what it's going to look like before you click Okie dokie, and if you like it, it updates it. And then we can go back to it, expand, and see what else we've got. Let's see, 1.5 lines at least. You can select that. 12 point. You can go 11 point, or you can get more persnickety. 11.5 point. Ooh, that's kind of kooky. In any case, go ahead and click OK if you like that. I'm going to go back to single spacing and click OK, or actually if I click cancel, it would be single spacing anyways. And then the shortcut keys, just go ahead and click inside of any paragraph or select a bunch of paragraphs. Control 1 is single spacing, Control 2 is double spacing, Control 5 is 1.5 spaces. Let me go back to Control 1 single spacing, and there's your line spacing in a nutshell here. And now for the paragraph spacing, spacing in between our paragraphs. Before I go ahead and show you that, let me get rid of that paragraph marker so we have no spacing in between these 2 paragraphs. And instead of clicking at the end and hitting the Enter key to add spacing, let me hit back and dealing with line spacing, so I click and drag and select the lines and do double spacing, which would add spacing in between these 2. Well, Control 2 for double spacing, but let's not do that. Control 1. Another thing that you can do is paragraph spacing is to say that with this paragraph I want to add some spacing after it or before it. So go ahead and click inside of any paragraph that you want to control the spacing before the paragraph or after, and come back up here, paragraph group, click its expandable dialog box button, and you have your before and after. Come back up here, and let's click on the line and paragraph spacing, and you've got add spacing before and after. You can see if you add it after, that it gives us the spacing that I'm looking for. Click on it after it. And if I go ahead and click and drag and select the paragraph marker, you can see it not only selects the marker, but the spacing after it. How much spacing after that paragraph? Well, if you want to get more detailed, then go ahead and, well, you don't have to select it. You can just click anywhere within the paragraph here. Come back up here, and instead of clicking on the drop-down arrow because it has its defaults of paragraph spacing before and after, and those defaults, when I click on the expandable dialog box button, over in the spacing for the paragraphs is 12 point. So when you use those defaults, if it's before, it's going to be 12 points before, after, 12 points after. And you can say, how about just 6 points? Instead of a full line, more like a half a line. And you can see it gives you a little bit less spacing here. Click Okie dokie and it kind of crunches up. So you can control the spacing before and after paragraphs. Let me go ahead and hit undo. And let's do undo again. And let's do this one. So now we really have a paragraph that needs some spacing before and after. So go ahead and click anywhere within it. Give it a right click for the shortcut. In the shortcut menu, select paragraph. And then go ahead and say you want some spacing before and after. And then go ahead and click Okie dokie, and there we go. Now, like with line spacing, when we had double spacing, let me go ahead and turn off the codes. If you're like, I got some spacing in between these paragraphs, let me go ahead and click in between these two and hit the Enter key to give it some more spacing. And you can't get it in there to even like type some text. And you're like, what's going on here? Well, you could come up here and turn on the Show Codes and go, okay, the paragraph above doesn't look like it's got double spacing, it's single spacing, so I'm guessing it's paragraph spacing. And instead of guessing, maybe you just want to jump right to it by right-clicking on this paragraph and saying, okay, go to the paragraph and say, does it have any before or after? And if it does, well, there you go. Mystery solved. And so that's why it might get a little bit frustrating or a little bit tricksy when you're like, hey, I want to put something in between these lines. You have two questions to ask yourself. Is it double spacing or is it paragraph spacing? If it's double spacing, then you should see something up above. Well, typically they'll have the paragraph above or beginning at that one and below it with double spacing, and so you can narrow that down. But if not, you can right click, go to the paragraph, and that immediately tells me that we're working with paragraph spacing. Now, by the same token, let me go ahead and go down. If you see something that's auto, that's its own settings here. And sometimes when I copy text off of a web page and paste it in my Word document, the default's going to be auto spacing. When I click Okie dokie, you see how it just adjusted it a little bit? It's just automatic spacing in between it. And if you're like, I don't like that, then go ahead and change the paragraph spacing by right-clicking and, of course, getting rid of the auto and either going down to 0 and then, hitting the Enter key to add a paragraph marker, a line in between that, or say, for this paragraph, we're just going to go ahead and go with before and after spacing. But let me click Okie dokie and hit Enter to add some lines in between the two. So we're back to where we were. Or let me go ahead and hit the backspace key and then click in the paragraph below. And the shortcut key for adding spacing before the paragraph, in other words, the paragraph up above before the one that I have selected down below, is Control-0. And how much spacing does it add? Good question. You know where to go if you want to find out the spacing before the paragraph. Right-click in the paragraph, go to the paragraph, and it's 12 point. So Control-0 are the shortcut keys to add 12-point spacing before your paragraph. If you need to create a list of items, one that's prioritized or ordered, like one being the most important, followed by 2, 3, 4, and so on, like creating a shopping list, or better yet, how about a camping list? Oh yeah, let me hit Enter. Now for the first item, I can number it myself or let Word do the numbering for me by coming up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group and clicking on Numbering. Create a numbered list. Click on it. Begins with 1. Great. The most important item to me when I'm camping is going to be, I don't know about you, but that's muy importante. So let me hit Enter. Automatically updates, goes to the next line and says that's the second most important, or number 2 within the list. Enter. And then when you're done and you want to go down below and type in some additional information about where the campsite's at, well, that's not part of the list. Hit Enter, and Word doesn't know that you're done with the list, so you can do one of quite a few things. You can either go ahead and hit the backspace key once, gets rid of the number, but it has the left indent aligned with the items here. Hit the backspace key again, then it goes back and aligns with the numbers. Hit it again, and then we're back to the margin here. Or, let me hit Undo. Couple of times, several times. You could hit Enter, automatically removes it, and takes us back to the beginning to the left margin here. Or, let me hit Undo. You can come up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group and then just deselect it and say you're done with numbering, in which case it removes it like hitting the Enter key on the keyboard for a second time. In any case, you got your choices there. And let me hit Enter again, and let's do another list. Hit Enter of items that I'd like to bring, that maybe if there's enough room to bring in what's in my top 3, that I can bring additional items, or again, my additional list, like. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why didn't you turn on the numbered list again so we can have it numbered and prioritized? Well, I'm doing that because what if somebody sends you a document, or you got one that you're like, hey, I'd like to go ahead and order this. How do I do it? Because it's already there. How do I get this into the numbered 1, 2, 3? To do that, just go ahead and click and drag to select it, and then you can, well, instead of coming up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group and clicking on the numbers there, in the mini formatting toolbar, well, when it did pull up, let me try it again, click and drag. And if it doesn't pull up, well, then you can go ahead and right click on the selection, then you can bring it back up again. In any case, you also get the option to turn the numbering on there as well. Click on it and it numbers them. And then you'll notice over to the left hand side you get this little smart tag. It's the autocorrect options. And we'll talk about the autocorrect options feature in more detail in a later training video. But as far as pertaining to the list here, when you click on it, Word is telling us that, hey, I see a list that's already there above this one. Is this a continuation of that list? Because if it is, I want to go ahead and continue the numbering from 3 to, click on it, 4. Or if you don't like it, the autocorrect option's still there. You can restart and it will never go away, that little tag, until you perform another action. Like if I hit the space bar, then it goes away. Let me go ahead and hit the backspace, and if I'm like, oh fudge, I want to go ahead and continue that, but the autocorrect option is no longer there. Or again, you get this from somebody else, you're like, how do I go ahead and continue it? I tell my students, when in doubt, right click, because usually what you're looking for is going to be in that shortcut menu. So let's go ahead and right click on the first item, and there we go. Continue. Click on it and it picks up where the last one left off. Or again, right click and say, nah, I'd like to restart at 1. Now keep in mind that when you're converting a bunch of items into a list, that each item has to have its own paragraph. For example, up here on the Home tab, Paragraph Group, let's click on the Show Codes. And I'm whipping through this because I assumed you watched previous training videos, and I would only speed through things if we covered them previously, otherwise I would slow down. In any case, if these guys don't have their own paragraphs, when you convert it into a list, like for example, let me click at the end of toilet paper, hit the delete key, then Word is going to think, okay, I've got nothing breaking it up, so I'm going to put these two together, but to us, they're two separate items because we don't have a toilet paper tent. I mean, the big bad wolf wouldn't have a problem blowing that thing down. So instead, make sure that your items, before you convert them, let me hit backspace enter, has its own paragraph. So that's why I hit enter at the end of each one of these items before I selected them and said go ahead and convert that into a numbered list. So it can number the items correctly and not have pillow matches where the pillow and the matches are together, and just like we talked about with our fabulous example of toilet paper tent. Let me go ahead and turn off the codes here. And let me show you some other options you got with your list. Well, you don't have to select the list to be able to look at other formatting options with the list. As opposed to 1, 2, 3, you can have ABCs. So we don't have to select it. Just click anywhere within the list here. Number 3, the last item, the first item, doesn't matter. And then you can right click to bring up the mini formatting toolbar. Click on the corresponding drop down arrow next to the numbering, or let me click off up here. In the paragraph group, you got the same thing. It's just that a right click bringing up the mini formatting toolbar is a lot closer, but click on the corresponding drop down arrow here and you can see 1, 2, 3, but you can go Roman numeral, hover over it, get a preview of it. If you like it, great, go with it. If not, then, well, choose something else, like maybe this one. And if you don't like any of those, then you can just move off of it, not select it. Or better yet, if you want to define your own and create a custom number format, click on that down below. And you can choose the style, go through it, find one that works for you. I'm going to go with 1, 2, 3. And you can actually change the formatting for the style. Click on font, maybe make it bold, say choose a color that's red, and then click okie dokie. And then the number format is 1. Of course, you can go ahead and customize that and type in something else to it. Like, well, since it's the second list, it's the extra list. That's my acronym for extra. And you can do that. That's fun. And then the alignments, left, centered, or right. If we did centered, it'll give you a preview of it. And if you did right, wow, really goes over. So let's just go ahead and keep it left and then see what it looks like when we click okie dokie. Oh, that's just crazy. Look at that. We got a lot of gappage in between that. How do we close the gap? Well, let's come up here and click on Show Codes. And you can see the arrows, as we went over in an earlier training video, are tabs. And so how do we bring that one? Let me go ahead and click and drag and select all these guys here and then come up in the horizontal ruler. That's the left indent. So if I click on that, it moves that further away from the items in the list. So if I click and drag that over closer, fabulous. Brings them up even tighter to it so it's not so far away from its neighbor. But you can go ahead and say the first line, bring that out so you can bring everything over and get it more aligned with this. And so you can play with those indent markers there to get it to where you think it looks apropos. In any case, let me go ahead and hit undo several times because I don't want to go with any of those. And after that, if you want to bring it back up, come back up here, click on the drop down arrow, and it remembers it was recently used. You can go ahead and go back to that if you'd like. And as part of the numbering library, you can right click on it, say you want to remove it, and never speak of it again. Okay, next, you can go ahead and create a gap in between the items within the list if you want to change the numbering sequence. Like for example, in the additional list, we have pillow, but I know I got some other things that I want to add before I bring along matches and comic books, maybe 3 additional things, 4 or 5. In any case, if I right click on number 2, I can come up and say that I want to set the numbering value from 2 on. Click on it, and there's 2. Let's say that it's going to be the 4th value within the list. And then click Okie dokie. And so when I look at the list now, I can say, okay, I've got pillow, but oh, I'm missing 2 additional items, number 2 and number 3. So then maybe I want to go ahead and when I find them, hit enter, and there's number 2, type in water, hit enter, food, and finish your list. Yeah, looks like I'll die of thirst and food before I let go of my pillow for sleeping at night and then the previous list, but hey, that's just the way I roll. Now, instead of a numbered list, if we want a list that's not really in any particular importance, it's just something that we have to bring everything, just make sure you bring them all so we're not confused. Let me come up here and turn off the codes first. We can go ahead and convert the numbers into a bulleted list. And so to do that, let's go ahead and click here. Then come up here on the Home tab in the Paragraph group, and there it is, Bullets. Create a bulleted list. Click on it, and it converts the entire list from numbers to bullets. Of course, you get the autocorrect option to say undo the formatting, go to the previous items, the numbers, but whatever. We're going to leave it there. And to get rid of that little guy, we'll just do another action and he'll disappear as soon as we turn our backs on it. Okay, let's go ahead and learn how to customize our bullets or define a bullet if we don't like what we see up here in the corresponding drop-down arrow next to the bullets, which we got some, well, circle, a square, looks like a little ship. In any case, you can select one of those, and when you hover over it, you get a preview of it over in the document. Or you can go ahead and change the list level, and I can go down to A1. Well, I'm not going to change that. I want to define a new bullet. And you can do it one of many ways. You can choose a symbol and say, what's our symbol? A heart. Go ahead and click Okie dokie. You can see the hearts down the preview window. That's fun. Or how about a picture? Click on that. You can browse and find a picture somewhere on your computer, or you can go ahead and do a search. How about hit enter and see what we find here. And we'll choose this one. And then go ahead and click on insert. Uh-oh, I don't see a preview of it down below. Probably not a good example. Let's go ahead and click on picture and click on browse instead of finding one off the internet in case if the size doesn't work. Let's see if I can do one here. Maybe do a sample picture. Double click and we'll do the desert. Double click. Oh, there you go. Okay, that stands out. And you can choose the left alignment, centered, whatever you'd like. And of course the final one is the font. So how do I get to font? It doesn't allow me to select it now since I selected picture. If I go back to symbol and I choose like hearts and click Okie dokie, then I can go ahead and choose font and make the heart bold. It kind of pops out a little bit. Maybe change the color of the heart to something red. Aw, isn't that cute? I do have a heart. In any case, you can do the picture, you can do the hearts, whatever you see here in the preview window, just make sure you see it there, because if you don't, as you just saw, then when you click OK, it's not going to appear over to the left-hand side. And it does. Hey, happy Valentine's Day. So we covered the numbered list, the bulleted list, now the multi-level list. You can click on that and see, well, there's the current list. So what this means is that at the first level within the list in the hierarchical structure is the heart. If I want to go down to the next level, that means that the letter A, if I click after this and I hit enter, then I hit the tab key, there's the sub to the main here. So toilet paper, maybe it has to be soft. Oh yeah. Then hit enter. And that also has to be large rolls. So that's all supporting of the main thought, idea, or item here about toilet paper. And so when I come back up here and I click on multi-level list, hover over it, you see how the hierarchical structure goes. So underneath the A and B, if I go ahead and create another item below that and I indent it, then it would be the lowercase I. So if I come underneath large roles, hit enter, and I hit the tab key and it pushes it over. So you see how that hierarchical structure is being defined in the multi-level list. Well, there you go. So let's go ahead and hit the backspace key, and then it goes back to the next level, hit the backspace key again, and then it goes to the original level here, hit the backspace key again, and you can keep doing that. But for me, let me just go ahead and hit the delete key on the keyboard so I can just go ahead and pull the item up above and not have to keep hitting back. In any case, to promote or demote the items within the list, or to increase or decrease indents, well, as you just saw, if you go ahead and hit enter, it creates the next list, and you hit the tab key, it pushes it over. Or if you want to go ahead and take one of these and click in front of the name of the item right after the numbered sequence, or in this case the letter sequence, and hit the tab key, that demotes it. And then to promote it or to decrease the indent, hold down the shift key, hit the tab key, and it brings it back. Shift tab, and now large rolls is a main item, which I have no idea what that is unless it was large cinnamon rolls, huh? There you go. And you can do it that way, or you can come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, and that's what you got these buttons for here as well. Increase the indent. So now he's demoted. Now he's part of the toilet paper thought item there. Large cinnamon rolls doesn't make sense. And you can go ahead and decrease that and say, well, doesn't describe soft, but nonetheless, you can go ahead and use that to increase or decrease or promote or demote within your multi-level list. Now we went ahead and we applied the multi-level list to this, but actually, let's click before the word water and hit the tab key. It actually converts it into a multi-level list, even though the number list is still selected, and click on the drop-down arrow. And at that level, it's ABCs. But if you click on the drop-down arrow for the numbered list, that's what you're looking at right now, 1A, and then the lowercase I. So if I come over here, hit the tab key again, you see it's a multi-level list without really telling you or highlighting this multi-level list. Just know that it starts off with something simple. As I hit undo, or I go ahead and decrease the indent or the shift tab shortcut key to bring it back to the original level, which is the numbered list. Just know that, well, it doesn't stay there if you want to go out of bounds and just go ahead and start indenting any one of these in the numbered list. And it won't highlight it over here in the multi-level list as you just saw, but nonetheless it'll be pulling from that. And the same goes with bullets. If I convert this to bullets, whoops, didn't convert all of them. Let me go ahead and hit undo. And let's select it and go ahead, and that way, if it does become an issue, you want to go ahead and select all of them so all of them change over. Then if I go ahead and select the second one, hit the tab key and demote it, it actually's got its own hierarchical structure now, doesn't it? Hit the tab key again, it becomes a square, so it is a multi-level list now instead of just a single bulleted list. You can click on the drop-down arrow, and you can see at that level, it's got that bullet, but at the multi-level list level, you can see how it's organized by hovering over the current list, the one that I'm currently in right now, with the solid bullet. Then the next level, the supporting to the solid bullet, is that open circle. Then of course below that's the square, and so on. And just like the numbering, even though I changed it, it's still staying at the bullet level here, but it is a multi-level. So really, you can just go ahead and select bullets or numbers, and then at any time, go ahead and use the tab key to push it over and create your levels within there, the multi-level, without actually coming over here and selecting it. Unless you like what's in the list library here, or you want to really get persnickety and define a new multi-level list. If you ever need to draw a line in between two paragraphs, because let's say the one up above is an entirely different thought than the one below it, so you want to border it off, or maybe box it and make it a box quote. In any case, to go ahead and put borders in between paragraphs, you could hold down the shift key and hit the underscore, but that's going to take too long and limits me with the more advanced editing and or features in Word. So let me go ahead and hit undo. Instead, I'm going to use the border feature, which can be applied to either selected text or paragraphs. First off, let's do it to paragraphs, and I'm going to apply it to this paragraph right here. Now, if it's just a single paragraph, I don't have to select it. I can just go ahead and place the cursor anywhere within it, because Word knows what a paragraph is. As you recall in earlier training videos, when you come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, turn on the codes, everything from that paragraph marker up until the next one is a paragraph. So I clicked within those two markers, so these 3 lines here, when I use the border feature, will be applied to, well, these 3 lines, or as we see it as a paragraph, but also as Word sees it, because I don't have a hard return at the end of these lines, making them separate paragraphs, just at the end of all 3 lines, making all 3 lines a paragraph. So let me come up here and turn it off. And to apply the border to it, come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, and there you go. Hover over it, you can see in the pop-up says borders, and when I move down below it, you can see that you got a box there, and the box, for the most part, is fuzzy, except for the bottom. That's going to be a bottom border. So if I click on the box, it means it'll add a bottom border to the paragraph that I have selected or the cursor that's flashing in it. Click on it, and there you go. Now if you're like, that's a little bit too squishy tight, you can do one of a couple of things. You can either click after it, hit enter, and it'll push it down, or you can use the paragraph feature to go ahead and right click and go to paragraph, and then go ahead and add some spacing after the paragraph, because when you hit enter, now you've got, well, let's turn on the codes here. You have that paragraph here and that border that's on the next paragraph. In any case, getting a little too techy, let's keep it simple and deselect it and come at the end, hit the delete key, and then come back up here and click on the corresponding drop down arrow and see what else you got. How about a top border? When you hover over it, it gives you a preview of it in the document. Click on it. There we go. Click on the drop down arrow. Maybe we want outside borders. We got a box quote now. Well, I don't have the quotes inside of it, but I could go ahead and offset it so it'll grab the reader's attention. It doesn't have to be a quote in it. Or click on the corresponding drop down arrow. And to get more detailed, click on borders and shading. Now in the borders and shading window, we have three tabs. We have the borders, page border, and shading. We're just going to be working with the borders and the shading for our selected text or paragraphs, and page border, well, that's another video. So first off, the borders tab, you got some settings default over to the left hand side. If you want something that has shadow, when I select it, well, before I select it, notice over here there's the preview window. When I select it, now it has shadow. I'm going to go back to box and change some of the details of the border around the current paragraph. Instead of the default style, align, how about if we go ahead and do a bunch of dashes there, and then it updates it over here. Cool. And maybe a different color, make it red, and how about a thickness of a width that's super thick and chunky? Ooh, that's pretty kooky. And if you don't like that, well, we can go back to a simple style, make it red. Well, maybe not a half point, maybe 1 point. And if you want to be able to mess this up just a bit and say, look, I'd like the top and bottom borders to be red and the left and right green, then go ahead and deselect those two. And you can deselect them one of two ways. You can either click within the preview window and get right on top of the lines, but if that doesn't work, then you've got these boxes on the outside, and if you look at them very closely, you'll see that each box is fuzzy but has a solid line in it, one solid line. So the box here has a top solid line for the top border. This box has a bottom solid line for the bottom border, and left and right for, well, left and right borders. So I can go ahead and change the color to green, and then say that's left and that's right, and ooh, that seems kind of fun. Let's click Okie Dokie and Merry Christmas. Well, let's come back up here, click on the drop down arrow, and go back to borders and shading. And if I'd like a little bit more spacing, well, between the border and the first line of the paragraph, or even the last line, or even on the sides, and then you can go ahead and click on options, and you've got it from the text. You can have the top border from the text. Well, come in here and type in 12, or go ahead and use the spin dial. And then when you hit the tab key, gives you the preview, pushes the text down, keeps the top border 12 points away from the first line. And then click Okie Dokie, and there you go. Now when you go ahead and you double click and you select a word there, notice that it selects the extra space up above. You may be led to believe that that could be paragraph spacing. So if you right click on it and go to the shortcut menu to paragraph, do you see any spacing before the paragraph there? No, it's 0. So now, having watched this training video, if you're like, hey, I thought he told us about paragraph spacing, there's none there. Well, now we know that when we have a line around it, that it's the border spacing. So then you want to come back up here, click on the drop down arrow, and actually, if I start messing with the borders and shading right now with the selected text, it's not going to show me, when I click on borders and shading, the box around the entire paragraph, because it's thinking I just want to do it around the selected text. Okay, let's go ahead and put a box around that selected text, and you can see over in the preview window, statement's going to have a box around it, which is going to look horrendous, but nonetheless, you can do it. You may have reasons for doing that, and then click Okie dokie, and ooh, there you go. And so, of course, with my cursor flashing anywhere within the paragraph, and I try it again, down to borders and shading, and then I get it back up. So I can go ahead and click on Options and set that back down to 1, hit Enter, and then if I'm like, oops, I don't like that around statement, double click to select the word, and then go ahead and click on the drop down arrow, borders and shading, and saying for that word, maybe you want to change the colors, or just go ahead and remove it. But you don't have to get this far to remove it. You can just click Cancel and click on the drop down arrow if it's just a border, and just select no border, and it removes it. So keep in mind what you have selected. If you want it for a paragraph, then make sure you either have the entire paragraph selected or you have the cursor flashing within it and not just part of the paragraph, unless of course you want part of the paragraph to have a border around it. Let me go ahead and click off. And then finally, some shading. Come up here, click on the drop down arrow because it is borders and shading. Select it, and let's go ahead and click on the shading tab. Something shady, click the fill color, and maybe something, ooh, let's do a light green. Click on it, ooh, that's not too light. Glad we got the preview window. Okay, a little bit lighter. And then go ahead and click Okie dokie, and nice. One last thing, let me go ahead and select some text within this paragraph, and then come up here and click on the drop down arrow and go to borders and shading. Now on the borders tab, it says you can apply this to the selected text or click on the drop down arrow and say paragraph. Of course, if we didn't have any text selected, the default would be paragraph, and we could only work with paragraph. So then I can go ahead and say I want that border, or you can click on the corresponding boxes to add your borders. And we can say that for the top. Oh, you're not even going to see that. And then this, maybe something for the bottom. In any case, click Okie dokie. You get the idea. And then to get rid of it, let's come back down here, clicking it. And the no borders is right there, so I can just go ahead and click on that instead of clicking on the drop down arrow. Keeps the shading, so keep that in mind if you're like, hey, what is this shading? Is it a highlight? Let me click and drag and come up here to the font group and click on highlight and say, well, it already has no color, how come it's still there? Again, that's what makes Word interesting, is that there's several different ways to go about doing something, and technically this is a highlight, but it's not from the highlighter, it's from shading. So click on the drop down arrow, borders and shading, select the shading tab, click on the drop down arrow and say you want no color, and click Okie dokie. As you can see within my document, I have headings for each of my sections. Like for this section, the heading is Step 1 Spiritually. For the next one is Step 2 Physically, and so on. And typically, you want your headings to have some sort of formatting applied to it that offsets it from the body of the supporting text below it, so the reader can more readily identify those sections. So you can do it manually by selecting the heading, and in the mini formatting toolbar, apply some formats like bold, italics, something spiffy, click off, and there you go. So it pops out and the reader can go, oh, this is about the spiritually healthy section. Now you can do it that way, like I said, manually, or let me go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. You can use styles. What is a style? It's a collection of formats that you can apply in a single click, like heading styles. Doesn't that sound cool? Because with this I had to do a couple of clicks. What if everything happened in a single click? Well, let me introduce you to that by coming up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, and hey, you've got Style. And if you want to click on the drop-down arrow, the More button, you can see more styles. Now in this training video, we're going to be learning about how to apply and the purpose and the benefits behind styles. We're not going to create a style, but you can do that. We'll learn about that in a later training video. So if you're looking at this going, okay, I see what you're looking at, using the heading 1 style for our headings there, but I don't like the size of it, I don't like the color. You can go ahead and right-click and modify it, but I digress. Let me just go ahead and click on it to apply it, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So first off, I wanted to show you what it looks like after you apply it, click off, and also the benefits from using the styles as opposed to, well, creating your own heading styles, by doing it step by step, making it bold, italics, doing your own thing. So the benefits behind using styles, one, is that, well, you got a single click. All you have to do is go ahead and, let me scroll down, click inside the paragraph here, because as you recall, up here on the Home tab in the paragraph group, click on the Show Codes. That line right there, that heading, is in its own paragraph. So I don't have to select it to apply a style. I just have to click anywhere within the paragraph and click on heading 1 and boom, it applies it. So let me go ahead and turn off the codes and go down to step 3 and apply that one. Step 4, quite a few steps. And step 5, and then when I'm done, let me click and drag the scroll bar all the way to the top. And that's one of the benefits, single click. And you can imagine if you can modify that so it's the style that you like, then once it's modified, you can apply that style in a single click. Now the other benefits include that once you apply a style to a heading, that when you hover back over that heading that has that style applied to it, look over there. Hey, you get a little drop down triangle. Click on it and it collapses everything below that style for heading 1 to the next one. And then you can collapse that and collapse step 3 and collapse that heading and collapse that and just focus simply on the headings within your document. So that way you don't have to scroll to get a review of all the headings. Or better yet, you don't even have to do that if you want to review all the headings by collapsing them, but you could if you'd like to prevent long scrolling times. But let me go ahead and expand all that again. Remember our navigation pane, Control F, the shortcut keys. Over here, you have your heading search. So select headings and it lists all the headings within your document. The headings that Word recognizes as headings because that's part of the coding. Because if you went ahead and you just applied your own, like I'll make that bold, make it blue, and that's supposed to be a heading, there's nothing there to tell Word that that's going to be different from making parts of your supporting text bold and saying, okay, this is bold, that's bold, they're all headings. But this is specifically coded and targeted to apply to our headings here, so it can automatically be pulled over here in the navigation pane. We can collapse it, and one more benefit is that these headings, once identified by applying styles to them, can be used in the table of contents. If you remember reading a book at the very beginning of the book, it'd have a listing of all the different chapters, and then it would have a ... Like, for example, here, if we created a table of contents here, which we'll learn about in a later training video, it would pull all the headings there onto the page, well, the first page within the document or second, doesn't matter, just somewhere at the beginning of the document. Like, let's say the first page, for the sake of argument, it would have all these headings there with the ... and the corresponding page number that they can be found on. So that way, when you print it off and somebody turns to the first or second page with the table of contents, they can go, you know what, I just want to go right to step 5 about family. What page is that on? They don't have to flip through a bunch of pages to get it. Better yet, if you keep this electronically, the table of contents acts like a link. So if in the table of contents I want to jump right to step 5 family, all I have to do is go ahead and click on that in the table of contents, and it takes me right to this page here to step 5. And speaking of which, you can actually consider this a table of contents because there's the contents button headings, and then to jump right to it, like step 2 physically, click on it, boom. Oh, that is sweet. Well, I'm sold. I'll start using heading styles. And if you're like, well, wait a second, I don't like these styles, again, we can go ahead and, let me click here, step 1, come up here on the Home tab in the Styles group, and like I said, when in doubt, right-click, because chances are when you right-click on something that you're working on, you'll have the answer in the shortcut menu. And so thus we have Modify. Click on it, and we've got the properties here. So the name of it's Heading 1, which you can change, and call it H1 if you'd like. And then the style it's based upon, style for following paragraphs, so additional styles to think about. But the formatting that's being applied to the style is the font Cambria, size 16. It looks like a dark blue. Click on the corresponding drop-down arrow. And you can see the box that's highlighted. Hover over it, and in the pop-up it says blue accent 1 darker 25%. Oh, okay. So there you go. Or you can come down below and read it out here. For the most part, it's got everything. So it's got the type of font Cambria, size 16, the color accent 1. Okay, it was darker, and also it was, well, it doesn't give us all of it, does it? Blue, darker 25% is missing. In any case, it gave us the accent, and then it's got 12-point space before it, so the paragraph doesn't close right on top of the heading. And then keep with next means that it's going to keep that paragraph with the next. So if it gets to the bottom of a page, instead of taking the supporting text and putting it at the top of the next page, so you got that odd thing going where you're like spiritually, then you go to the top of the next page and reading it, and after a while going, what was this about again? So you have to go back to the bottom of the previous page and go, oh, that's right, it's about being spiritual. So what it does is it keeps that with the paragraphs, so it'll force this onto the next page, and you'll have some extra space at the bottom of the previous page, so it can keep everything together, keep with the next paragraph. Now keep lines together, and don't worry, we'll talk about the keep next and keep lines together in a later training video. But keep lines together means that if you have a lot of text, like 2 or 3 lines, that has the heading 1 style applied to it, that again, if it's going to create what we'll talk about orphans and widows, where it keeps 1 line here, and then because it's at the bottom of a page, it can't keep the other 2 lines that has the heading style with it. Instead of breaking that and having that at the top of the next page, it forces everything to the top of the next page so we don't have a broken heading. So keep with the next paragraph, or if you have several lines that has the heading style, keep all lines together and don't break them across the pages, the level 1 in any case. Now to modify it, well, it's pretty simple. You can select the colors here, like make it red, italics, underline, and then when you're done, click Okie dokie, and there you go. And then scroll down, and it automatically updated all the others that have the same heading style applied to it. Let me go ahead and hit undo. Go back, come up here, right-click to modify to see additional options. Like when you go ahead and you work with this, do you want it only in this document or all new documents based upon this template? So the heading 1 by default will be in every single document you create, but when you make changes to it, it's only going to be in this document until you select the option that you want new documents to be based upon the changes you made in this template. And then if you want to get more particular with additional formats to see what's available, click on the Format button, go to Font, and well, there's the Advanced tab. How about if we go to the Font tab and do strike through, additional formatting options, click Cancel, click Format. You can even assign it a shortcut key if you'd like, instead of coming all the way up here and clicking on that to apply it to a paragraph, especially if you're not on the Home tab and you don't want to go all the way over and click on the Home tab. In any case, shortcut key, select it. With the cursor flashing and press new shortcut key, you can try one of the Control, Shift, or Alt keys to a letter like Control P, but we already know that that's currently assigned to the Print, Preview, and Print. At least as we talked about in an earlier training video. Let's go ahead and hit the backspace key and try it again. How about Control, Shift, Alt, Z? Ooh, that's pretty crazy, all 4 fingers. That's going to take some coordination, and you can see that it's unassigned. So let's go ahead and click Assign It. It's assigned. Click Close. Click Okie dokie. And let's go ahead and click inside of this paragraph. Well, let's do this one right here. Read more. Control, Alt, Shift, Z. Hey, that was fast. Let me go ahead and undo that. And then, of course, to get rid of it, if you don't want the shortcut keys, right-click to modify, Format, shortcut key, select it, remove it, and it's gone. Click Okie dokie. Now, if you apply the style already and you want to do some changes and you go ahead and select the text that has the style applied to it, the paragraph, and you're like, let me see, red, I do like that, italics, underline, oh no, bold, no, how about just that? And you like that, and you're like, oh, rats, I wish I would have modified it so I could make the changes there first before I went and messed with it here, because now it's only applied to that one and not all the others. That's okay. All you have to do is go ahead with the, well, paragraphs still selected. It's still the heading 1 style with some additions. If you want to go ahead and update the heading 1 to reflect what you have selected here, then right-click and update heading to match selection. Left-click, and you can see now it's updated, so it's no longer in blue. In the gallery, it's red, and everybody else is red. Ooh, they're so angry red. And then you got some additional options when you right-click on it. You can select all 5 instances of it. So when you scroll down, all 5 are selected. You can right-click on it, rename it if you'd like, but I'll keep it as is. And remove from the style gallery, which I don't want to mess with that. I'll leave it there. Click off. And then finally, if you want to be able to have more heading styles available, because like you have your heading 1 here, and let's say you have some sections within the section here that have their subheadings to the heading 1, like spiritually. You also want to focus on meditating. Maybe you have a subheading that's meditating, all about meditating as part of that. So in any case, to get your subheadings like heading 2, 3, 4, then go ahead and click on the expandable dialog box for styles. Open up the styles window. Come down below click on Manage Styles and go to the Recommend tab. It'll probably dump you on the Edit tab, but we'll go to the Recommend because that's what I recommend. And you can see, let me click off, that heading 1 is black and bold, and as opposed to the others that are hiding in a shade of gray. So it's going to be hidden until used. Well, to undo that, select it and say Show. And then it jumps around. That's okay. Let's scroll back down here and select 3 and say Show. And I'm good. Let's click Okie dokie. And then keep in mind here as well, it says what you do will only be done in this document unless you say, I would like the headings 2 and 3 available in all new documents as well. That's all right. We'll just keep it here and click Okie dokie and then close out of here and click on the More button. And there you go. There's heading 2. So with everything selected, if I hover over heading 2, you get a preview of it in your document. Well, you have a preview here, but at least I can see it within context within the document. And then there's heading 3, and it's tinier. So like I said, if you don't like what you see here, right-click and modify it, update it so it fits your narrative. That way you can take advantage of all the benefits with the advanced features of table contents, collapsing it, and also viewing it in the navigation pane and jumping right to those headings in a single click. Unlike the Show Hide feature where you can view some of the formatting marks throughout the document, well, by coming up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group, turning on the codes, the Reveal Formatting task pane will actually list the formatting applied to the selected text, or wherever you click in, the formatting that's around that. So to bring it up, you can do it one of two ways, either the long way, which is up here on the Home tab in the Styles group, and clicking on its expandable dialog box button, coming down below and clicking on Style Inspector, come over here in the open window and click on Reveal Formatting. Click on it, opens up the task pane, so I have to close to be able to see it. And so there it is, Family E Health, and then down below the formatting of the selected text, or the cursor's flashing within that paragraph. You can see the font that's being applied to it. It's Cambria, size 26. There it is, Cambria, size 26. And so you get quite a bit of detail here, like the character spacing, which is up here on the expandable dialog box of the font group on the Advanced tab. There you go, spacing 0.25, 0.25, kern at 14. We'll go over that in a later training video. Close out. And basically pretty much all the details. And if you, well, let me scroll up and show you that when it comes to one thing that I've noticed, like the font color to it is text 2. Well, that doesn't tell me a whole lot, does it? So if I come up here and click on the corresponding font color drop-down arrow, it's dark blue, text 2, darker 25%. So it does have text 2, but it doesn't tell me it's dark blue or darker 25%. So it's missing a few things that I'd like to see. In any case, you can do it the long way. Let me close out of it. Or the shortcut keys are Shift F1 to reveal it, Shift F1 again to close it. Let's do Shift F1 to bring it back up. And if you hover over the top part here, you get a drop-down arrow. Click on it, and you can go ahead and clear all formatting, and it's gone. Let's go ahead and undo that. You get some other options as well. You can select all text with similar formatting, like if I come down here and click in Step 1 Spiritually, which is heading 1, click on it here and select all text with similar. You can see it selected all with similar formatting. So if you want to be able to update everything at the same time, you can do it because it's all selected, or of course click on the drop down arrow and apply formatting of surrounding text. So if I have some format around some text that I have selected here, I can apply that formatting that's around it to it. Let me go ahead and close out. You can do it that way to clear the format, or come up here on the Home tab to the font group, and it's right there as well. Clear all formatting. Click on it, and it's totally broken down, man. It's got nothing. It's been deformatted. A table is basically a box that has a bunch of other boxes within it called cells. And all those cells within that box is called a table. And tables are typically used to organize text, data, or images. So here, I want to insert a table to help me organize and keep track of the number of houses sold by the senior sales associates. And in the first cell, or in this column of cells, I'm going to have the name of my salespersons, and in the adjacent set of cells or column of cells will be for the months of January and its cells, followed by February and March. So to insert my table, just come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, and before I click on the Table button, make sure you're mindful of where the cursor is flashing, because wherever it's at, that's where it's going to dump the table into. I don't want to dump it in front or before the title of the table. I want to put the table after the title here. So click below it, come up here, click on Table, and there you go. Just go ahead and choose how many cells you want in your table. You could have a 1-by-1 table, one cell. That still makes up a table. Or you can go down and over, and you'll notice that it highlights in orange, and you can see a preview of it within the document. And so what you see is a 3-by-5 table, 3 columns by 5 rows. But I'm going to do a 4-by-1, so 1 row by 4 columns. Click on the last cell there, and there we go. Cursor's flashing in the first cell, so let me go ahead and type in my labels for my table with my associates. And to get to the next cell, of course, you can use the mouse to click in the next cell, or you can use the arrow keys, left or right, or you can use the tab key, tab. And to go backwards, if you over-tabbed, hold down the shift key, then hit tab to go back. And then we can finish here. This will be for Jan, Feb, and Mar. Now when you get to the end of a row and you're like, oh, I need another row, just go ahead and hit the tab key and voila, it adds another row for us. Fabulous. And then we can go ahead and add our data below the labels that we entered into row 1. Like for associates, the first one is Bob Jones. Welcome, Bob. Hit the tab key and the number of houses he sold in January, February, and March. And now notice that when I'm within the table or the cursor's flashing in the table, it brings up its corresponding related contextual design and layout tabs, wherein where I click outside of it, they disappear because Word says, okay, you're not working with the table, so you don't need the tools for the table. But if you are working with the table, then click inside the table so it can bring up its related contextual tabs, the table tools. When it comes to modifying your tables, as far as inserting and or deleting columns, rows, cells, and also an entire table for that matter, there are many ways you can go about doing it, and I mean many. One way is to right-click. So if I right-click in cell that contains the data number 44 there, in the shortcut menu, I can insert or delete. And you can also see that down below in the mini formatting toolbar, you get the insert and delete options as well. And there's a subtle difference between the two. We'll go over that in just a minute. But first off, in the shortcut menu, to insert, you can insert columns to the left or to the right of the cell that you're in, that the cursor's in, which is right there. So if I go to insert and I do columns to the left, I just get one column. However, let me hit undo. If I go ahead and click and drag and select 2 columns and a right click on the selection and I say insert and I go columns to the left, because I have 2 columns selected, it's going to duplicate that and click on insert and I get 2 columns, blank columns to the left of the 2 columns that I had selected. Let me go ahead and hit undo, go back and let's right click in the cell 44 to insert. And so in addition to inserting columns to the left or the right, if I just have one cell selected, it's 1 column, and multiple columns, well, multiple columns are inserted. Same concept goes for inserting rows above and below. So if I insert a row above, just 1 row, because I had the cursor in 1 cell, basically just 1 row selected. And let me go ahead and hit undo. And if I right click and go to insert, I got the final option to insert cells. Click on it. Now you get 4 options, 2 of which we already covered. They're here. You can insert an entire row or column. But the ones that are new are shifting cells to the right or down. So when you insert just a new cell, the contents here, when a new cell comes in, has to get shoved somewhere. And so it says you can shove it over to the right, in which case if this gets shoved to the right, then it pushes this guy over to the right, pushes that guy out to the end. If I do down, which is the default here, the number 44 gets pushed down into a row by itself. So click okie dokie and he's all alone. Let me go ahead, well, instead of hitting undo, how about if I just go ahead and right click on the cell up above and say I want to delete that cell. So when I remove that cell, do I want the contents from the right to shift over to the left? That's what it means to shift left. Or do I want the contents that are below to be pulled up when this cell disappears? because, if we don't have something there, the whole thing is going to collapse. So let's go ahead and say that we want to shift up, click Okie dokie, and it gets pulled up. So when I right click, we went over the insert option in the shortcut menu, and down below in the mini formatting toolbar, click on insert. The only thing you don't get here is the insert cells. You got rows above or below, columns to the left or right, but not the insert cells. So there's the difference between the two there. And then as far as the deletion goes, when you click on it in the mini formatting toolbar, you can delete cells, delete columns, rows, but also a table. Wherein when you right click in the shortcut menu, you can only delete cells. You don't get the option to delete the entire table, or even deleting an entire column or row unless you select an entire row or column, and we'll cover how to select your cells, columns, or rows, or the entire table for that matter in just a minute. But we're not done yet, so we can go ahead and right click to get those options. You can also come up here on the Layout tab to the Rows and Columns group, and you get the delete option. You can delete the cells, the columns, the rows, the table. Oh, that's spooky. Don't want to do that. Let me hit undo. You can also insert above where the cursor is flashing, so insert above. Let's go ahead and hit undo, and you can insert below, to left and right. You also have the expandable dialog box button for that window. Click on it, and you get the same little window that we saw when it came to inserting cells, that when a new cell gets inserted, that the contents of this one, for this cell, get shifted or pushed over to the right to make way for the new cell, or down. Let's click cancel. And then finally, to insert columns or rows, you can do it just from the table itself. So if I hover over the top of any one of these columns, and I want to insert a column in between these two columns, January and February, just go over at the top in between the two and you get the plus sign. You can go ahead and click and then go over and click and then go over and click and keep adding a bunch of them. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo. Or over to the rows here, at the beginning of each row, in between two rows, you get the plus sign. If you go out too far, it disappears. So get right up next to it and then click, 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 click. It's just crazy. Look at all those rows. Now, speaking of which, if you close out of Word and you have this saved and you open it back up and you're like, oh, rats, I don't have the undo option anymore. How can I delete dozens, if not hundreds of rows at the same time? Because I don't want to right click on each one and say, delete a row, right click, delete a row, delete a cell. Well, you see the difference between that? This one's delete cells, where before that it was delete row. And what that was is that when you have an entire row selected and you right click on the selection, you get the delete row option. Otherwise, when you right click in a cell, it says delete cells. But as you recall, when you delete a cell, you get the option to delete an entire row or column. So how do you go ahead and select the rows? Well, first off, when it comes to selection, if you want to select just a cell, you can click and drag. Oops, it went to two cells. Go back. There's one cell. And so if you want to click off and try it again, click and drag. There you go. You can select your entire rows there. Then right click on the selection. Go ahead and go down to delete cells and delete entire row. It says row, but because I have multiple selected, when I click Okie dokie, it deletes all of them. Hit undo. Or you can go ahead to select a cell if you don't want to click and drag, or a row, or the entire document. You can hover over to the left-hand side, close to the border of the cell in the margin, and you get this black arrow pointing inwards. When you click on it once, it selects the entire cell. When you double-click, it selects the entire row. If you triple-click, it selects the entire document. So you can go ahead and click and hold down the left mouse button with your black arrow and drag and do it that way, and right-click. And not only can you do it by rows with the black arrow, but you can also do it by columns. So let me click off. If you hover over the top part, right against the top border of the column, you get a black arrow pointing downwards. Click on it, selects the entire column, double click, and then you can click and hold down the left mouse button and drag it over to the right and select it column by column. So you can make your selections that way, click and drag, use the black arrows, or come up here on the Layout tab to the Table group, click on the Select drop-down arrow, and then wherever the cursor is flashing, you can select the cell there, select the column, the row, or the entire table. Now you can select the entire table that way, like if you want to apply formatting to all the contents within the table. But what if you're not on the Layout tab? You're on the Home tab. Well, that's too many clicks. So what you can do is, well, you don't have to be within the table. You can click outside of the table and you can see the cursors outside of it, that when you hover over the table, you see that little tag in the upper left-hand corner? That's the selection tool for the entire table. So when you click on it, it selects the entire table. Great! That way you don't have to come all the way up here and click on the Layout tab to go over and click on Select and go down to Table. When it comes to working within your cells, let me come up here and click on the Home tab, go to the Paragraph group, turn on the codes. You'll see the code for a cell. That's the fuzzy circle. If you didn't have a fuzzy circle, there wouldn't be a cell there. And when I hit the space bar, you can see the code is that dot. Let me hit the backspace key. But when I want to tab within a cell, when I hit the tab key, it advances to the next cell. So if I want to tab within the cell, hold down the control key, then hit tab, and there you go. Control tab. Let me hit the backspace key and then come up here and turn off the codes. Next, if I want to switch my columns or rows around, it's a simple cut and paste. So if I want to move February, hover over the top part of that column for February until I can see a black arrow pointing down. Click on it to select the entire column, or of course you can, come in here, click and drag and select the column. In any case, when you have a column or the entire row selected, go ahead and do Control X to cut it, and then let's go ahead and paste it before January, so I can go ahead and click anywhere within the January column, and then when I do Control V as in Victor, it pastes it before January. And then after I paste it, you get the paste options here. So there's the default, insert as a new column to the left of the column that the cursor was flashing in. And next is you can insert it as a nested table, so a table within the January cell, or you can insert as new rows. Well, that's kind of kooky. Or you can just go ahead and keep the text only, in which case the text is dumped right into that cell, the same cell as January, including everything within that column, which was just, 56 and the month, Feb. Let me go ahead and not do it that way. Let me hit undo and undo. And so if you don't want to, after you cut it, Control V as in Victor to paste it, you can, of course, right-click a cell within that column that you want to paste it in front of, and you get the same paste options. You can insert it as a new column, and of course all the other options there, but insert as new column, and there you go. So that's how you can go ahead and flip columns or rows around, just a simple cut and paste. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. Now, if you have a lot of spacing in between your columns and rows, you can bring them in tighter if you'd like by hovering over for the columns, the lines in between the columns until you can see arrows pointing to left and right, or for the rows, hover over the line between the rows until you can see arrows pointing up and down. In any case, for the columns, left and right, you can go ahead and click and drag it in. And if you want to do a best fit or automatically fit to the contents within the column, the longest contents within the column, double click really fast and there you go. Now you want to make sure if you do that, double click, that you don't have a cell selected, because you can, like in between these two columns, the border there, double click really fast, it does nothing. So click off, then go ahead and double click really fast and then click back within it. You can do it that way, or you can come up here, click on the Layout tab, go to the Cell Size group and click on Auto Fit, and you can do Auto Fit Contents, and hey, isn't that a lot slickerer? Let's go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and say, hey, let's do an auto fit to the window. Well, it wasn't the same as before, but it automatically fits it, puts the left border of the table to the margin, the 1-inch margin, the right to the, 6.5, 1-inch margin there. Or, if you'd like, you can right-click on the tag there and get the same option in the shortcut menu, Auto Fit Contents, cool. And then finally, if you want to move your table around, just come up here and click on the tag. If you can't see the tag, let me click outside of the table. If you're outside, the tag isn't going to show until you hover over the table. If you're in the table, you hover outside of it, it's still there. So with the tag there, go ahead and click on it. When you click on it, that's like the ear, that when somebody pulls you by the ear, ow, 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 you have to go with it. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.